I have a guest with me today that one of my coworkers reached out to me and said, "You got to talk to this guy because he has a not only does he have a great story to tell, but he's really a role model for what we need to see in this profession now to bring others to a profession that is frankly perpetually short-staffed and very often demonized and vilified." So I looked this guy up and I said, "Oh yeah, this is a guy I got to talk to." Officer Matias Ferreira, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I'm going to ask you what I ask every single cop or retired cop that comes on the show. Why'd you become a cop?
I'll be honest with you, it was kind of like my second option after the military. After 9/11, that was kind of my dream since I was a child to become a United States Marine. And I'm sure we'll get into the story, but after getting out of the military, that was really the only, I wouldn't really like to call it a plan B or backup, but it's something that was very similar to the values of the military. So that's kind of what I went after.
Well, and that's the thing. Law enforcement traditionally very often recruits from the military, and that has served our profession well for decades and decades. And we'll get more into that. So you have a distinction of being one of the only double amputee police officers. I think maybe the only in the United States. So let's talk about your Marine career. Let's talk about Afghanistan, and let's talk about how you came to have a distinction that you certainly didn't want to have, but you've made the best of it. Let's talk about your Marine career.
No, I appreciate it. So after 9/11, I was in about eighth grade, ninth grade, going into high school. And I remember telling my parents, this is something that I've always wanted to do. We moved to the United States from a very small country in South America, Uruguay. And my mom's brother and family lived in Atlanta, Georgia. So for the 1996 Olympics, we moved up and, we chasing that whole American dream, to have family going to school and getting good jobs and, being part of society. And that was kind of my way of giving back to a country that had given me and my family so much. And there was a man in uniform at the Olympics, and and now what I know is dress blue uniform. And I told my dad, I was like, I kind of want to be that cop one day. And my dad looks at me and kind of explains the best way he can to a 7, 8-year-old that that's not a cop, that it's a Marine. And I asked him what he did, and his short answer was, they protect us from the bad guys. So that's all I could think about in my head. I wanted to be like the guy that protects people from the bad guy. So on 9/11, I kind of put it in my head that I was going into the Marine Corps, and I did. I enlisted in 2009, and I went in what's called open infantry, which I knew I was going to be in some kind of capacity of infantry, but I didn't know if I was going to be a machine gunner or what. So when we get there, we're told that, hey, we're going to be deploying to Helmand Province, Afghanistan in September of 2010, and that, we were going to be doing this whole thing, Operation Enduring Freedom. So we're like, how the hell are we going to go to Afghanistan? And we don't even know what we're doing. I've been in the Marine Corps for not over a year. So we did the workup. We go to CAX, which is California and Mojave Desert. We do some workups in Fort Pickett, Virginia, and kind of doing our whole basic workup. And then they tell us, hey, September 1st, we're going off to Afghanistan, and then we'll be standing by for orders. So we get there, we kind of land in the helicopter, and I'm just kind of going, oh my God, that turbine is really hot, until the helicopter pulls away and it's still that hot. And I'm like, oh my God, Afghanistan is like hell right now. It's 120, 130 degrees. Dry heat, of course. It's a little bit different, a little bit more tolerable. And while we're there a couple of weeks, we start taking pop fire from the Taliban, from the hills. And, we like to say that they can't really aim for, the S word. And we try to do the best we can, that we operate on patrols. And what we're there is basically to learn how the population, the community works, and to win the hearts and mind of the people to get as much information and intel as we can. So we're kind of pushing these operations out throughout the months, and we're getting past Thanksgiving and my birthday and Jesus' birthday, and everything's passing by, and it's like, all right, you know what? I think it's time to go home now. Like, what are we doing here? So on the night of January 21st, 2011, my team and I were asked to do a push across a wadi, which is a land of water, which at that point it was dried up, and basically take over a new town that had Taliban insurgents and IEDs enlaced everywhere. So we went into the compound, boom, the doors kick in. We're looking for IEDs. We can't find anything. Dogs don't find anything. And I was tasked to put my team on the roof to do some overwatch throughout the night until the next day we can do some patrols. So we get on the roof and I tell my guys, hey, let's stay put. We're going to get some sandbags, put them on the tripods and run the machine guns. And they said, all right, good to go. As soon as I jump off the roof, I land on a 30-pound bomb that had been dug underneath the dirt. And it had rained a couple of days before. So that's why when we stepped on it, it didn't go off with all my equipment on and the pressure of jumping off the roof. The bomb went off. And, I'm looking up at the sky and I just hear in the background, Bravo, Mike Foxtrot, 7229er. And, they're shouting out the non-line medevac to get the helicopter in. And my buddy's like, hey, everything's going to be okay. We're going to get you home. And I'm just wondering like why he's talking to me about getting me home because my body hadn't, really quite realized what happened. I was still in shock and morphine's getting pushed into me. And so now you hear the helicopter in the air. They were kind of close, which is my saving grace because I had lost both legs below the knees and broke my pelvis, shattered my femur. And, they were trying to push fluids and blood and everything right there in theater. So now the helicopter lands, takes me out of there. They take me to a local hospital. They stop the bleeding. They do all emergency surgeries. They send me over to Landshut, Germany. And that's kind of where I began my whole, recovery process and really trying to figure out what happened and how we're going to go forward from here.
Now, once you end up in the hospital in Germany, and I know you're there with a whole lot of other people in similar circumstances. But here you are, you're young, you're fit, you want to serve, and you're missing both your legs below the knee. What is your thought process to what are we going to do from here?
I'll be honest with you, that was kind of the question that I carried with me throughout all of recovery. I'm sure that all the rest of the guys felt the exact same way, but I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. I just figured, hey, I got to get through this first. I got to get through walking, running, and doing what I have to do again. And then, we'll figure everything else from there.
So many of our military members end up in a perpetual state of depression or drug addiction. What do you attribute your success? And we'll talk more about that, but what is it? And really, frankly, what would you advise anybody to think about in such catastrophic circumstances?
I'll be honest with you. I haven't really learned too much about the mental health world until recently, after becoming a police officer, just because back in the day, you're surrounded by your camaraderie, you're surrounded by your guys and everybody's pushing each other. And I always preach this, in the police world now, which we'll get into later, to the recruits. I think a lot of people, and I've seen it happen too often in our country, people are really getting away from religion. And I feel like faith is kind of what's kept me together this whole time. And I try to find verses in the Bible that kind of lead me to so many years back that still compares to today's life. So being raised in a Christian family household, I think that my family's constantly, hey, God's got this. Hey, we're going to pray. Hey, everything's going to be okay. And it never really failed me. I stepped on a 30-pound bomb and lost both my legs. I had teammates who stepped on 10-pound bombs and lost their life. So for me, I just couldn't believe how I'd been given or afforded an opportunity to continue to live life. I like to call it my second opportunity at life, right? My second chance. And the whole mental health aspect, the depression and the anxiety and all that. Number one, I think it's normal. So it's something that we have to bring up in today's police world, military, whatever it is. I think that I heard it best from one of my staff sergeants. They said, once you become a United States Marine or any kind of military service member or first responder, somebody who's willing to give their life for people, for the community, for the country, you have to understand that we don't have this badge that says, hey, you're exempt from depression, anxiety, stress, or whatever else. That's the problem with what we got going on now in today's world, is that people don't realize that cops and first responders and military doctors, I mean, these people who are in these high stressful jobs are constantly pushing their body to do things we're not naturally meant to be in full stage 24/7, right? So you're constantly, looking around for the bad guy. You're constantly patrolling the streets. You're constantly getting code blues or whatever is in the hospital setting. So for me, the best way that I can describe it is, hey, it's a normal phenomenon. It's going to happen. And we just have to figure out how to get resources to help us, manage and cope with it.
You bring up so many important things here. Do you think, we see this push right now in the American military to push religion out, especially at the service academies, things like that. And yet you're talking about your Christianity and secondly, that camaraderie as being two very pivotal things in your recovery. And I think as we go on to talk more about law enforcement, I think that's one of the things that when a police officer is involved in a critical incident, very often instead of putting them in that situation of extraordinary camaraderie, what do we do? What do we do with a cop when he or she gets into a shooting? We
Yeah.
isolate them, right? Put
Isolate.
them
Yeah.
somewhere by themselves. And you're testament to the fact that instead of isolation, we need that camaraderie, right?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I'm 35 years old. When I got injured, I was 20, 21 years old. I'd never met an amputee in my entire life leading up to the point that I became an amputee. So for me, the unknown is what people are scared of, right? That's what they fear. Um, I think that in law enforcement, like you said, we isolate. So people are scared to talk about their mental health, talk about what they're dealing with after a critical incident. They're very timid of what the job may do, and instead, what we need to do is demonstrate what we're capable of doing. Hey, you're doing a stressful job. We're going to take good care of you. I can't really talk about other departments. I can't talk about mine. They've done an incredible job at helping my colleagues and myself in many different aspects. I mean, we have a PBA that pretty much backs us up on everything. We have a PBA psychologist, which is huge. I've talked to other buddies throughout the country because I have friends all over the United States and out of the country who are cops, and they're like, we don't really have that. And I'm like, it's shocking to me that we have people, doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, let me just stop myself. I believe being a law enforcement officer is more difficult than being in the military. In the police world, at least in my department, majority of the vehicles are single operators. So you're driving in a police vehicle by yourself. So you're almost given this power to make decisions, of course, in the moment. And then we ask questions later. And I think that's difficult. That's difficult that you're pretty much requiring a lot of these new police officers, 20, 21 years old, to make these decisions, which half of them never even held a real career. They never had a family. They never even been in a stressful environment besides the police academy. So, yeah, I just feel like surrounding yourself around people who have been there, done that, surrounding yourself around experience, that's kind of where I fall back on. It's okay. Well, if, in my opinion, if Jesus Christ went through all these things, then who am I to be so different from him? So I think that's kind of the foundation that I was set in my family. And I mean, it works. I know it doesn't work for everybody, but for me, it does.
I love that. That's fantastic. So let's go back to Germany. You come home, you go to Walter Reed, and I think you spent about a year there, right?
Yeah.
Rehabilitating.
Yeah. We had a place called the MATSI, which is the Military Advanced Training Center. That's where all the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, the doctors, they're pushing therapy. They're doing peer support, which again, here we go again, surrounding yourself around people who've been there, done that. I had a guy named Josh Weggy, and I always kind of hype him up. Just imagine Ed Sheeran with no legs. That's him. Redhead, very nice guy, very soft on the face. Hey, my name's Josh. How are you? And he's telling me about like, hey, we have these teams. And of course, I always forget to tell you, he's wearing jeans and a t-shirt and GBX boots that most people know those are extremely heavy. And I'm like, who is this guy in here preaching to me about everything's going to be okay and you're going to play sports? And then my parents are in there too. So they see how I'm starting to get frustrated. So then when I finally say like, hey man, like no offense, but I don't know if you noticed, I have no legs. And he goes, yeah, I know. I always forget to show this part. And I pulls up his pant leg and he's a double amputee as well. So now my eyes are like this, and I have a zillion questions of somebody who just got injured 2 weeks ago. Am I going to be able to drive again? Am I going to be able to get a girlfriend at some point? Like these are legitimate questions for a 21-year-old. All my buddies are at the bar having fun and kind of incorporating themselves in that college world and everything we see happening at a young age. And here I am in a hospital on medications, walking with a walker, and embarrassed to even go out in public. So it's people like him and every other guy that I surrounded myself around that gave me my confidence back. They gave me I love the word hope. He gave me the hope that everything's going to be okay. You're going to be able to walk again. And then everything else after that is just a plus, because you think about losing your legs or your arm in the moment and you're like, oh my God, my life is ruined. But when you have somebody like that demonstrating you that anything's possible, man, that is a big fuel to get you going.
So you spend that year, learning to walk again. You've got prosthetics. You learn how to redo everything. And I got to say this as a mom with 4 kids, So you sat your parents down and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to become a cop." I think, did your mother whack you in the head? What did she do?
Man, that was complicated trying to tell them because I didn't know how to go about it. I was playing on a very competitive softball team, which I actually still play on. It was called the Wounded Warrior Amputee Softball Team. Now it's called the USA Patriots. It's all veterans that were injured in the line of duty or in somehow capacity of being an amputee now. And we play against able-bodied teams, and we're actually pretty good. So every time we go to a different place, a different state, different city all over the United States, we play against first responders. So that's kind of where my eyes kind of lit up. I had a teammate who was about 50 something years old at the time. He was a Desert Storm veteran, lost his leg to a landmine in Desert Storm. And he was a narcotics police officer in Arizona. And so I'm like, dude, I got to ask you, like, I had so many questions. I was like, the police department let you? Like, can you still drive? He's like, man, I'm on a motorcycle team. I drive my car. I still chase the bad guy. So again, I'm surrounding myself around people who've been there, done that. And so one time, one of these guys asked me, they go, hey, what are you going to do with your life? You're very active. You're playing ball. You're a parent. You're married. You have this going. You got that going. I said, look, I'd love to be in law enforcement. I think that's the closest thing to it, but I have no idea where to start. At the time, I was Googling double amputee police officers, and I ran into a lot of guys who maybe got hurt on the job and stayed on the job. And there was a couple single below the knee amputees who had come in as a single, but not as a double. So I was really scared to tell my parents anything because I didn't want to disappoint them with, hey, I'm doing this again, and you're going to stand around your phone waiting for that same phone call. My parents are still traumatized, 13, 14 years later. So once I told them that, they go, look, honey, we're never going to tell you what to do, and we're always going to be extremely proud of you, but just know what you're doing. And I go, well, I don't think I really knew what I was doing when I got in the Marine Corps, so I got to give this a shot and learn the hard way. So that's just the way I've always been. OJT, on the job training. If it's for me, I'll stay. If it's not, I'll go. So that's kind of how we went about it. I took the test. I took the physical. I went through the psych, the poly, which is pretty much the same thing for everybody else. And I was pretty much in shock when the department called me back to let me know, hey, on a Friday, Monday, you're starting the academy. And I go, here we go again. So I'm shaving my head. I'm getting my shoes shine. I got my pencils and my ID and my suit's ready to go. So I was just kind of like doing this whole second chance again, second go around.
How upfront were you about being a double amputee? Did you wait until you took your physical, or when did you let the agency know?
I mean, we have to take a written exam, and so when I scored high enough, which that was a big shocker for me, because as you know, what we say about Marines, we're not very intelligent. We are more intelligent than we give ourselves credit for, but I scored very well on the on the written, and when I showed up to the physical, I showed up in shorts. I had already spoke to the VA, and I said, hey, I want to do this. Can I get a letter stating that I'm fit for duty, and that anything that the police requires, the military is going to cover, like my prosthetics and everything else. And so when I got there, sure enough, they were like, hey, do you have a letter stating you can do this? I mean, we don't doubt you can. So I presented the letter. They talked to the command staff. The command staff said, hey, if he's here, he's got the letter, give him a shot. And I'm sure there was some phone calls made as well. And I actually failed my first run. I had like a little weird complication. I tried to get cute, and I showed up with new prosthetics, and they weren't tightened down all the way. So one of my bolts kind of came loose. So I failed the run, and lucky for me, you get a second chance 2 weeks later. So I came back 2 weeks later, and I aced everything, and everything was good to go. So for me, it was one of those things again where I'm like, God, if this is meant for me, give it to me. If not, then I'll do what it is that's next chapter. And sure enough, I went back the second time, I passed, and we started the ball rolling.
What have you been doing during your police career once you got out of field training?
So once I got off field training, I was on patrol. I did 2 tours. So we worked 7 to 3 and 3 to 11, rotating shifts. And or if you can go to midnights, you have 4 on, 4 off. So I started off on 2 tour, and then once I was comfortable enough, I kind of wanted to transition to the midnights. It was a little bit better for me. The schedule, 4 on, 4 off. I was doing a lot of speaking engagements and nonprofit work and this and that. So I figured, hey, this might be good for me. I loved the team that was on that midnight crew, so I went to the midnights. I stayed there for a while, and then an opportunity arose to stay in the precinct that I worked at as the CLO, which is the community liaison officer. You work, hand in hand with the commanding officer and the deputy inspector and sergeants with, any kind of community issues and coffee with a cop and that whole thing. And then I was there for a little while, and there was an opening that spot that opened up at the academy to be one of the instructors there and run drill and ceremony and The inspector that's there now was actually the lieutenant. And so he's like, hey, Matty, you're bilingual, you're a military guy, everybody loves you. What do you think? Do you think that'd be good for you? So I did. I took it, and that was 4.5 years ago. I've been there ever since.
So we hear a lot about police departments who have to reduce their standards, especially their physical standards, in order to get more people to come to the job. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Again, I can only speak for my department. We have a pretty set standard where we record the principal or the beginning agility. So to get onto the department, we have cameras recording the push-up station, the sit-up station, the run. So that's basically covering ourselves, the department, and for them. For the candidates to have an opportunity to make sure they're covered. So our run time is based on gender and age. Our push-ups, sit-ups based on gender and age, and you get into the department with a certain percentage. And I'm sure it's like this in a lot of the departments. Is the Cooper standard. So there's no really way around that. And then when they're in the academy, they're expected to graduate at a higher standard. So now we're pushing out a higher standard. And every time, the recruit class comes out, we're starting to see that these guys are starting to join up CrossFit gyms, jiu-jitsu, taking on different sports. I mean, my department has soccer, they have lacrosse, they have, volleyball. I mean, we're golf, anything you can think of. So we are trying with the fraternal organizations to keep guys engaged and staying fit. So I think that's a huge help. But I can't imagine a police officer wanting to come onto the job and doing a job that might not get you home at the end of the day and not putting in a full effort to get you prepared.
Manny, where can people find you? Where could they bring you, reach you to bring you in for public speaking and just learn more about you?
I mean, I'm all over Google because I've done some pretty cool stuff with a lot of nonprofit organizations that I'm proud to be a part of. But my social media handles are typically like where people see my pictures and they follow my story, and I post a lot of stuff. My Instagram is just Indeed, so INDEEDUSMC. And then Facebook is just my first and last name, Matias Ferreira.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, we are so proud of you, and we can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Are you passionate about supporting law enforcement? The National Police Association is on a mission to strengthen our communities, protect our families, and ensure justice prevails. But they need your help. Every dollar you donate makes a difference. It funds the legal defense of police officers and police agencies, supports advocacy for pro-law enforcement legislation, and funds community outreach programs and education. Imagine safer streets, stronger bonds between officers and neighborhoods, and a brighter future for all. Join us. Visit our website at nationalpolice.org to donate today.